1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the, anyone? The Great Depression, passed the, anyone? A tariff bill, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which...
Welcome, Bruchim Abiyim. I'm Rabbi Paul, your virtual rabbi. You have found Beit Virtuali, and let's stir up a little Torah together.
Bueller.
I know. On YouTube, you have approximately 30 seconds to capture someone. On this channel, if I can get someone to make it past 30 seconds, then I have a 50-50 chance of getting you to watch to the end. So then here today, it makes complete sense that I've started with the Gen X prototype of the boring.
Anyone?
Of course, in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, we don't skip past Ben Stein's brilliantly improvised lecture regarding the 1930 Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act. In the context of watching one of the great teen comedies of the 80s, Ben Stein's impersonation of everyone's nightmare social studies teacher is not boring. It is a part of the case being made for why Ferris could not possibly be asked to experience that lecture, while the rest of the world, even if that world holds breaking every possible rule, holds such possibility.
How could I possibly be expected to handle school on a day like this?
The teacher and lecture are laughably boring. In the context of the greater narrative, they are hilarious. They are integral. They count. So perhaps from this context we can approach the boring parts of the Torah. It's okay to admit it. Parshiot like Bamidbar hit us, well, like a Ben Stein roll call, because that's kind of what we read. These are the names of the men who shall assist you. From Reuben, Elizur, son of Shedeur. From Simeon, Shemuliel, son of Tzurishaddai. Bueller. Of course, that's just the beginning of the Bamidbar fun. A census is being taken, first to count every male head by the clans of the ancestral houses, and second to count those able to serve militarily, specifically, for this time and place, those 20 years and older who are able to bear arms. Specific people are to count, and specific people are to be counted. The naming of the chiefs is followed by a great way to learn your Hebrew numbers, if you choose to chant this section, as we get a couple chapters of the troop counts, tribe by tribe. And just when it seems like Ben Stein's roll call is about to be lifted, we then move on to the names of the sons of Aaron, the priests. At least there we get lucky, as some of their duties get listed, so a break from the monotony. Yes, let's admit it. This is not the greatest toe tapper from biblical tradition. At the beginning of the book of Numbers, Nephilim are not walking the earth. Aaron is not committing idolatry. Miriam is not talking smack against her brother. The Nile is not being turned to blood. Spies are not being sent forth. Jacob is not cheating his brother. And although our ancestors were most likely grumbling while the census was being taken, Torah has the good grace to not take yet another opportunity to remind us of our proclivities. So thank goodness for that. Still, Bueller. Yet notice the choice here. I choose to enjoy a movie for whatever reason, and then therefore am able to experience something as wonderful, which in another context would be awful. Sure, by the time I get to the scene with the class roll call, I'm already most likely sucked into Ferris Bueller's Day Off, but I could still, if I chose, isolate that moment and then walk out of the theater with a dismissive cluck of my tongue and a hand gesture while mumbling, "That's boring, man." How we see a text before we even step into it is a meta issue when we read Torah that can be approached with the previously quoted wisdom of Lex Luthor.
Some people can read War and Peace and come away thinking it's a simple adventure story. Others can read the ingredients on a chewing gum wrapper and unlock the secrets of the universe.
How are we approaching the reading of Torah or any of our sacred traditions? Do we start with the assumption that it's backwards with no relevance? Then fine, that is 100% assured what we will find when we open the covers. Is it boring? Then we will be bored. Is it filled with treasure? Well, even here it depends on how narrowly and specifically we define treasure. If I walk along a beach at sunset and search for gold, I'm probably then going to miss the wetness of the sand, the sound of the waves, the enormity of the ocean, and the awesomeness of the colors in the sky as the sun sinks. That feels a bit sad. There is more treasure than gold. The first meta issue is not even that the act of reading Torah has intrinsic value in the Torah itself, inherent meaning. For you, it may not. That's your choice. This first gate to enter, which not accidentally coincides with pretty much every spiritual tradition, is the one that says we are not yet as humans as aware as we can be. Whether it's the bubblegum wrapper, Tolstoy, or Torah, it is an absolute spiritual necessity as human beings to continuously evolve. This requires taking in external information that challenges us internally. This requires dialogue outside of our set beliefs. Once this process has stopped, either actively through the always false belief that we have nothing left to learn, or passively through letting the necessities of the everyday become the entirety of our lives, then there is no growth, no ability for us to add skills and tools to live, or at the very worst, to fail better. I choose Torah in the largest sense of Jewish sacred texts because it is my tradition and, more importantly, contains tried and true collected wisdom that has against all odds enabled a people to thrive that, according to history, shouldn't continue to exist. Sounds like a good repository of wisdom that will challenge me, and they give me good enough reasons to assume meaning in Torah. You may make a different choice. Even the bubblegum wrapper. The critical element here is stepping into a place ready to be in dialogue and possessing a broad enough definition of treasure to make the trip meaningful and elevating. How I teach this will depend on context. As a rabbi speaking with Jews, I'm going to point at Torah when I discuss with Jews how to open a gate into meaningful dialogue. As a spiritual leader, I will care more about the underlying spiritual truth and less about the specifics. From that standpoint, I don't care how you pray or meditate, but are you taking some time each day to enter a place where dialogue is even possible? I don't care how or if you celebrate traditional Jewish Shabbat, but are you unplugging each week in what every therapist on the face of this planet will agree is the bare minimum to retain our sanity and lower our anxiety? I don't care how or if you follow the rules of kashrut, but are you aware of what is going into your body, and does that contain a dialogue that includes mind, body, spirit? Even within Judaism itself, the traditional expressions of all these items are meaningless without first deciding that meditative dialogue, unplugging, and the quality of fuel are important to begin with. Praying 3 times a day with the Hebrew text takes practice, but will have a low probability of conveying meaning if we don't first understand how overloaded with life we are, which forces us to stare at a screen nonstop. How can we pray if we can't even stand up from our spreadsheets and stretch? We are captured by everyday requirements. Prayer and meditation is an antidote. Shabbos contains a multitude of required rituals and rules, but if we cannot leave social media for 15 minutes, then what are we going to gain from forcing a day? We have to start with acknowledging the need to unplug in the first place for a larger amount of time, enough time to reset us to begin again. And if, as is one of my personally biggest issues, eating is an absent-minded activity to drown out stress and anxiety, how is following all kosher rabbinical rules going to make any difference if I do not allow the most basic conscientiousness to enter into my dialogue with the food? There's a decision to be made first, and that decision is that my life in its current form is not adequate and needs elevation. If that elevation will come from a deep reading of bubblegum wrapper, then so be it. Baruch Hashem. I've at least entered the possibility of elevation. I'm personally going to choose Torah, which starts with assuming value and meaning instead of boredom, followed by defining treasure broadly enough that my explorations of text is not solely a scavenger hunt for items within my confirmation bias. This year, as I got past my own human proclivities to eye roll when seeing the lists of names and numbers in the book of Numbers, 2 ideas came swirling out. One that I have used in sermons before, but which has taken on a different meaning in this time of the year. And the other for me is a different take on the lists of names, but both have felt like a treasure. Regarding the lists of names, Torah, especially Genesis, is filled with genealogies, which also fall easily into a Bueller type of passage. One of the purposes of genealogies is to show legitimacy. Jacob's prophecy, for example, on his deathbed, that quote, "The scepter," symbolizing rulership and kingship, "shall not pass out of the tribe of Judah," necessitates at some point a genealogy to show that David descends from Judah, a genealogy we get at the end of the book of Ruth. The Tanakh presents the Davidic line as the legit line, and lists of names are the tool to make this case. The lists of names in Parashat Bamidbar are not exactly a genealogy, but they are still an attempt to list leaders from all tribal groups. Knowing a little about the historical narratives in the Tanakh and how the North and South split, this inclusion of all tribes in a roll call of legitimacy is quite beautiful. Put differently, all Torah texts can be pulled into the present and read as if they are happening to us. This is explicit in the Passover Haggadah, as we are told that in every generation we are required to read the Exodus from Egypt as if it were happening to us. Bechol dor vador. The time in the wilderness is a part of the greater Exodus narrative, so the case is easy to make to pull the text into now and ask questions regarding our lists, who is on them, and what kind of legitimacy they designate. Do we list, for example, those that have been a part of our life as still a part of our life when they have broken from us, or we from them due to the ever-increasing inability for society to talk with someone of a different political party or to maintain a relationship after we've had a single disagreement? Is that person who once gave so much of themselves to our life, yet had the gall to vote for that person or that party, still on the list of part of us as legitimate in our lives, or have they been excised? The final version of the Torah came to us from the southern kingdom of Judah, consisting of the tribes of Judah, Benjamin, the landless Simeonites that remained in that area, and the Levites that served in that area. Yet here we are, reading in the final version of the book of Numbers of Asher and Dan and Issachar and Ephraim and Manasseh. They're still a part of us and have not been excised, even after pain, horrible separation, and yes, radically different approaches to Judaism. We still listed them. They're still a part of us. Moreover, how do we signal that we wish to be included in lists today? Think of how we, meaning all we's on every side of the political and cultural debate, we all do it. Signal our inclusion in others' lists via hashtags, specific sorts of posts, flags, I stand with statements. Signaling loyalty is neither inherently bad nor particularly new. Each of the Hebrew tribes camped beneath a banner that made clearer their identity. We follow in and continue in great and old traditions. But are our posts the extent of our virtue? Or do we put our time into elevating the groups with which we stand? And if that's laudably so, have we, as part of that, included taking the time to consider, is there anyone that we are tearing down in the process of standing up for someone else? Have we considered what that means? And have we considered then the nature of how we are standing up? And should that be modified, considered, changed, entering into a dialogue to not just assume? Which brings me to the final meditation. Joyfully, this meditation also happens to function as a pun, and the only part of the Torah that I can find that works better in English than in the biblical Hebrew. Parashat Bamidbar requires us to count. Certain people are to be counted and therefore count for the sake of the census. And if we are allowed to pull Torah into today, then our Torah portion becomes a meditation on the question of who counts in all the possible meanings of this delicious phrase. In the act of counting, who gets to do the counting? In the act of counting, who is counted? Who counts? When we start an act of counting, when we are the counter, we have a specific power. Where I live, a place that in the summer is a popular tourist destination, the part of the island where my house sits is on the agricultural, non-tourist side. The other side has picture beaches and expensive vacation bungalows. When an infrastructure improvement like a desperately needed bike path is built, it will be built on the other side of the island. Someone is counting and someone is being counted. The person that is doing the counting also counts in a way that the person without agency to count does not. In this case, they neither count nor can count. And not at all speaking from personal experience. It's very much the experience of choosing sides in school for teams. Do y'all still do that today? The two that get to choose are the ones that already count in the eyes of the gym teacher, who also has counted those two. The gym teacher has the power to count and therefore define who counts and is counted. If you have had the constant experience of being first chosen, you've not had the experience of not counting. If you are the last chosen, you have an intrinsic experience of neither having the ability to count nor of being counted. And then, yeah, even with our own personal lives and choices, how are we counting ourselves in the moment? How narrow are we counting the potential moments of treasure around us? How are we counting and how are we counted? What counts?
I figure life's a gift, and I don't intend on wasting it. You never know what hand you're gonna get dealt next. You learn to take life as it comes at you, to make each day count.
To making it count.
Parashat Bamidbar, if we choose to enter its gates, is as non-boring, non-Bueller, and as relevant today as it was for those honored with the ability to count and be counted in the wilderness. In the last generations, our morality has expanded to include more and more in the lists of who counts, which is as beautiful as seeing an unexpected treasure. It also can, and has, led to new lists of people who have the power to do the counting, who then count, and those that no longer count, and then count less, something that inherently tears down instead of purely lifts up. In our default lives, it's often obvious who counts for us as we are able to list them, find them on our friend lists, and see the most common likes to our posts, another list of who counts in a very specific way. But the more critical question, also the iterative one that needs to be occasionally asked in order to keep us from building high walls that isolate us from any opinion other than our own, is who doesn't count. We don't like using such formulations because such a statement, "these people count to me," says an awful lot about us and little about the people on that list. But the acknowledgement of such a list is part of that strength that has allowed us to step into a parsha filled with names and numbers and enable us to contribute just a bit more to the healing of the world around us, and perhaps expand our list of what we automatically find exciting and the list of how many things we can let count. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We'll see you next time.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.